Oh, wow, she's been doing it long. Why break the
Catherine, would
routine?
you do the invocation first?
That don't make me no difference, though.
I'd like to call to order the November 8th meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee. Madam Secretary, let the record show that all members are present but Ms. Cazzo. Item number 2 is our invocation pledge of allegiance. Everyone please rise for that, and we'll be led in prayer this evening by Ms. Catherine Guppold.
Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we come to you in the mighty name of Jesus. You've created the earth. You've created us. You brought us here to this day with all our strength, with our energy, with our talents. And you've asked us to do our best for our community, for the people here. So we pray tonight in our deliberations, discussions, and decisions that you would be sovereign in our hearts and in our minds. We pray now for our military around the country, around the nation, those that are protecting the border. They're protecting our rights and freedoms, and they're so important. They're being taken from us every day. We pray for our president for his safety. We pray for the safety and the health of our elected officials at every level. We pray for Ruth Bader Ginsburg as she's in the hospital tonight. You are sovereign in her days as well. We pray for our country as we're on the brink of many troubled times, it seems, that you would put peace in the hearts of the people and love and acceptance to work together, to unify each other together in this country, in the world, to help others, to serve others for a better world. We thank you now for this time that you've given us, the freedom we have. In the mighty name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this afternoon. It's getting a little chilly out there, so it takes a little bit of an extra effort, but glad to see your faces. Item number 3 is chair's additions. I just have one addition to the agenda. In discussing some of this with a couple of my colleagues in the antechambers, I realized as chair I listed items number 7 and 8 as discussion only. There seems to be a will that we would want to go ahead and make them actionable as are items 6 and 9. In so doing, this would allow this committee to not hold a meeting in December, of which the chair of our full council, Mr. Dawson, has indicated at the last council meeting that he would make that optional up to the committee chairs. So said another way, if we act upon this, and remember, we're just a recommending body, so regardless of whether it comes out of committee or not, either one of the 2 items that are sponsored, and those are items 7 and 8 by Councilman Lawler tonight, it still has to go to the full council and would do so at the last, well, not the last, I believe, Bill, we have 2 more meetings yet for the full council, one more yet in this month, and then one in the month of December. So
I'll make that motion.
So the chair will take a motion, and Mr. Dawson is making it that we make items number 7 and 8, for the record, Madam Secretary, actionable and not just discussion.
Second.
Second by Councilman Joseph. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, that motion carries. Moving right along then, number 4 is a public comment period. Anyone wishing to speak tonight on any of these 4 now actionable items, 5, 6, 7, or 8, come forward and fill out a speaker's card and give it to Jessica Marcotte, and I'm sure she'll give it to me, and at the time the item comes up, you will be given 3 minutes to speak. Item number 5 then, approval of the October 11, 2018 Strategic Planning Committee minutes. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Councilman Joseph, second by Councilman Dawson to accept the minutes of October 11. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, those minutes are accepted. Item number 6. Before we have our public speakers come up on item number 6, I thought we would let the sponsor of no, excuse me, yeah. In each case, we're going to have the sponsor of the different items on our agenda introduce this. In this case, this is to consider requesting a study be done to determine the number of disadvantaged businesses in Ascension Parish, and the sponsor is Councilman Joseph. Mr. Joseph.
Yes, sir. We had a young lady speak last meeting, and it was concerning the DBE program, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. And for us to move forward with this, to see do we need this type of program in Ascension Parish, we need to at least get a study done. So on this here, I'm requesting that we send this to administration to go out for bids or quotes to get individuals that does this here study for disadvantaged business and get the study done.
I'll move we make that request.
Okay, I have a motion that we request a study be done to determine the number of disadvantaged businesses in Ascension Parish. Second by Mr. Joseph. Any discussion of this item? Any objection? Hearing none, that motion carries. Jessica, you can handle that. Thank you, dear. Item number 7. Number 7 was a discussion, but now we'll have an action on it. Is to modify the Unified Land Development Code, specifically Section 17.5013, entitled Design Criteria, to increase the detention pond capacity from a 10-year to 25-year storm event, which in your packets, gentlemen, you will see that changes a rain event on a detention pond from 8.5 inches in a 24-hour period to 10 inches. And in addition, the sponsor tonight, Mr. Lawler, has sent me sort of a last-minute additional change he'd like to see, and I will call him up to the mic now and let him speak about that, as well as why he feels the need that we do this. Aaron?
Thank you, Chairman Satterley. Losing my voice. First of all, thank you all for indulging me and letting me come speak on this issue. What we're looking at is currently our storm drainage capacity and retention ponds built in subdivisions is built to a minimum of a 10-year standard, which is 8.5 inches over a 24-hour period. What I would like to see done is that we increase the minimum standard to 25 years as far as retention goes, but keep outflow at the 10-year standard. What that would do is that would create a 1.5-inch hold retention period over a 24-hour period. So what would happen is when a neighborhood is built and a subdivision that goes up there, you have these ponds, and you'd have a net 1.5-inch benefit to the surrounding areas. Because right now, I don't believe that what we're doing is benefiting the people that live in the surrounding neighborhoods. From anecdotal evidence, I believe what we're seeing is an increase in flooding around new subdivisions. Even if or not, this is going to produce a benefit to the parish overall. What we're doing is we're slowing the rate. We're having stormwater retention of 1.5 inches, excuse me, with this change in design. So what I'd like to see it read, and I'll read it into the record, is with regard to the capacity, storm drainage design, unless otherwise noted, shall utilize a minimum retention capacity of a 25-year, 24-hour storm duration as determined by Technical Paper 40 published by the National Weather Service, currently 10 inches over a 24-hour period, and a maximum outflow of a 10-year, 24-hour storm duration as determined by Technical Paper 40, currently 8.5 inches over a 24-hour period. I believe the people of this parish recently spoke very loudly when, by a 2/3 to 1/3 majority in a vote, they voted to approve to continue to pay 5 mills in drainage taxes. This would not cost the people of the parish a thing. This is not the government stepping in and doing this. This would be us working with the developers that are building these big neighborhoods to come in and build a slightly better slightly better project that I think would benefit the entire community of Ascension Parish. I urge you all to consider this. happy to take any questions, although I'm slowly losing my voice, it appears.
Thank you, Mr. Lawler. And before we bring the public comment up, we do have two speakers tonight that want to speak in support of this proposal that you're sponsoring. I want to just reiterate, I want to reiterate one thing and add a new thing. In your package, gentlemen, this evening, as Mr. Lawler read, is the actual legal language that goes with 1750-31 under design criteria, but it does not contain the additional red. The 10 to 25 is in there, and the 8.5 inches to 10 that Mr. Lawler just read. So let me remind you, if we have a motion today, it's not on what's in your packet, it's what Mr. Lawler read. And the additional red would be at the end of that sentence after it says storm duration, and right before as determined, we would be adding in a maximum outflow of a 10-year, 24-hour storm duration. The second thing I want to put into the record is that I did speak to Mr. O'Neill Parrington about this, inviting him to come to the meeting tonight earlier today, and he said to send his regrets. He has a family conflict with a grandyoung, and he just couldn't make it. But we spoke about it as well as the next two items on the agenda, and he says legally we're on solid ground to do this. It's whatever the council work. He actually wrote positive things about it. We discussed other parishes, for example, that already are on 25-year storm detention pines and so forth, and anyway, he has no problem with it. So with that said, we will bring up the public speakers, Aaron, and if we need you, we'll bring you back up, sir.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Our first speaker tonight on item number 7 is Mr. Jeff Pettit, who will be speaking in support.
Good evening. I'd like to echo what Councilman Lawler said. Anecdotal evidence, you can go to any new subdivision after a rain and you will see water puddling and pooling where it never did before. I would strongly urge this committee to pass this out of the committee to the full council. And, you know, these three items are all tied together. I would also ask this committee to do one more thing. Can you please get the East Ascension Drainage Commission to get off the dime and take the HNTB study and bring it before that full board and discuss it and let the public have input to it? Can a resolution come out of this committee to get them off the dime? But I'm in support of this. I'm in support of what Mr. Lawler said. It makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pettit. Ms. Catherine Guppold.
Thank you, gentlemen. Considering the flood of 2016 and the fact that it is not a matter of if it will happen again, but when it will happen, it would behoove the governing authority to do all in their legislative power to mitigate the next disaster. Increasing detention pond capacity from 10 to 25 years and preventing future erosion are both required and necessary. I'm speaking on both items 7 and 8. Changing the Unified Development Land Code now will place these requirements on new development. Considering the increased development in our parish, it is irresponsible that these items have not been previously addressed. Our governing authority is consistent about one thing: being irresponsible. Procrastination only makes things worse. Why is it so hard for the Ascension Parish Council members to make decisions that will benefit the people? Are you playing the blame game, blaming those who previously failed to address the priorities, or those presently who are ambivalent or resistant to making changes? Are you playing the political game? I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. Quid pro quo. Basically, what's in it for me? Imagine what you could accomplish if every council member would work for the people instead of being part of the good old boy club. I agree with Councilman Graves, who recently spoke to the council and stated our constituents are being re-victimized by the government. If you did not run for political office to serve the people, you should get out of the arena. Councilman Satterley did not solicit the next comment, but I am pleased to give it. I can honestly say that during his honorable tenure, he has respectfully and consistently worked for and served not only the people of District 4, but the entire Ascension community. For this, he is appreciated and lauded by citizens throughout the parish. I wish I could say the same for my councilman. The time for discussion is past, the time for studies is over, and it is time to act. Dragging the feet does nothing to solve the problem. These two items should come out of this committee with a favorable recommendation for the entire council, ASAP. Anything less is unacceptable. Start working for the people, even if your motive is to get reelected next year. All possible legislative remedies should be applied immediately to rein in the unbridled growth. Prepare and plan for the next disaster, as if your life depended on it. Thank you.
Thank
And please
both of the
place
speakers.
these in the record.
Thank both of the speakers this evening. Aaron, if you want to come on back up now. And the chair will open the floor to any questions for Mr. Lawler and Mr. Joseph.
Yes,
Yeah,
Councilman Joseph.
Aaron, does this have to go through East Ascension Drainage, or
No, I don't see any reason why it would have to.
I'm just making sure we don't skip somebody?
No, right
Committee,
now,
or-
detention ponds and subdivisions are not maintained or otherwise the concern of East Central Drainage. This can come through strategic planning, go straight to the council.
Okay.
Yeah, we might I add, if I allow me to interject here, Aaron and OJ, I talked to O'Neill about that specifically. This is an alteration of the Unified Land Development Code. It's well within the prerogative of us to start the ball rolling, which is what I think we're going to try to do here tonight. But eventually, it's going to take the full council to do it, which I think it's important to do that because the full council contains one more member than does the East Ascension Drainage Board, because it would leave you out of it, OJ. So that being said, I think we're on solid ice there. Mr. Dawson.
Aaron, I have a couple of questions. It's my appreciation of this, the 24-hour event. That's something that is updated periodically, if I remember that correctly. So I'm kind of reluctant to put this 10 inches over a 24-hour period, or maybe precede that with currently 10 inches over a 24-hour period. But I think it should be, the what is published there currently, so that if it's updated, then we get the benefit of that.
I believe I may have left out the word currently, but I have it written on here, and
Okay.
I may have just misspoken. But that's, as the law is written now, it says currently, and I may have just misspoken when I said that.
Okay, because, and I think we kind of need to be careful with it because, again, it's been a while since I've dealt with these, but if I remember correctly, it's a graph. And so, the 24-hour event isn't based on, let's say you have 10 inches, it's not going to be a 24th of that every hour. There's a graph that shows that it rains at 6 or 7 inches an hour, and then that subsides. So, I think we just have to be careful that we don't put something in there that restricts, the full impact of this paper.
All we did was we switched from 10-year to 25-year.
Yeah,
And you're
so
right.
it might not have been correct before.
Well,
I definitely am not in favor of putting a number in there because it's, unless you put something that doesn't make it, where we have to stick to it because it is updated periodically.
yeah, I believe the last update was in 2013.
Okay. So,
So I'm confused, Bill, if you allow me, so would currently solve the problem or not? Because if it's been updated at 2013 and likely will be again at
Yeah.
some point,
And-
it's always
and-
going to say currently, and therefore it engenders
The
then
only-
the current update.
yeah, and the only problem with that is, and I'd have to think about the design of that, is that as I said, it's a graph, and you have, and it's not a 24th of, you can't just take a 24th of 10 inches and apply that every hour. You have to apply it how this model shows it falling.
But I'm certainly not an engineer, but the engineers have been able to figure it out with the term 10-year, even though it's a graph. They've been able to figure it out on that. They should be able to figure it out at 25-year also. So, if you want to leave out the currently 10 inches over a 24-hour period and the currently 8.5 inches over a 24-hour period, that's fine with me because I don't believe that changes the impact of
Yeah.
it. And the engineers have
Right.
been doing it on this basis for as long as we've had this.
By
in-
virtue of just going to the storm event language change.
Correct.
I got you.
So, I mean, I guess all I'm asking is sometimes before we bring it to the council, that somebody talk to Sean Giroux or somebody at CSRS that currently works in this and see if this covers everything, in the 25-year event.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So I've also got, I don't know if this is, you and I talked about this some, and Doc and I also talked about this some, is, we have the maintenance, the maintenance of these detention ponds is an issue. And so I'm actually considering making some amendment here to where we do something to assure ourselves, maybe even that the parish, takes in those ponds, because, we really have no control over them after the developer walks away, as as you're aware. So I guess, I'll just form that into a question, which is, do you think that, one, there's a possible solution to that would be that the parish takes those in like they do the roads. However, as Councilman Satterley and I talked about, there should be a fee associated with that, some calculation of what that's going to cost the parish, and put an impact fee or whatever we want to, call it there.
Yeah, let me just say what we did talk about it was twofold. One is in this item, and the next one's coming up in 8. One would be if we had an impact fee and collected money, one would be that money is needed for routine maintenance of, which is the same problem we have when we take roads into the maintenance system of the road, of that pond. In other words, when it silts up, whatever experts would tell us is a frequency that we would need to get in there to clean it out. The other is an all separate issue, which is coming up in the next item, which is what are we going to do about the sides of these ponds? We know that there was a case recently in Mossy Oaks, and it made it to the media, where neighbors who had the unfortunate circumstance of just living next door when that was approved, the sides of that the detention pond in Mossy Oaks, the new subdivision, failed, and their fences and mud and all was sloping in there, and the parish, on record said, well, we can't do nothing about that. And the developer says, well, we can't do anything about it. And so now you've got a third party holding the bag. So I'm all for, appreciate Bill's question. And I've already told him, Andy Chambers, and I'll say it now in public, I support something along the lines of an impact fee or something up front that would say you're not only going to be responsible, which the developer, as we all know, will take whatever the money's going to be and roll it into how you want to say, the sale of the home, which the homeowner will roll into the mortgage of the home, and it becomes smaller dollars as opposed to us being holding the bag and taking like we do roads in, and it becomes large dollars, and all the taxpayers have to be burdened with it as opposed to those that are generally directly affected. So I would speak in support of it as a question, or I don't know if tonight we want to get that technical, gentlemen, that's up to y'all to amend what Aaron's talking about or not, but I'm an active listener. But I do support the idea of getting to that level, because these ponds, I've said this before, I think, in public. I know I've said it in private to lots of people. What do? I mean, they build it. Half of these subdivisions don't even form active POAs. Some of them have covenants, but they don't put that into their covenant. So just like with a green space or anything, with time, everything's fresh and new and it's fine. But what happens when the sides fail and the pond gets silted in and so forth? I think it's our responsibility to address that. So, Mr. Lawler?
Yeah, what I would like to see is that we keep, that really bleeds into item number 8, talking about erosion on ponds and maintenance of the ponds. I'd like to keep the two issues separate because I think they really are separate. I won't bleed into 8 right now, but I think we'll discuss that under item number 8.
Okay.
So we're looking for a motion to move this forward, number 7.
Yes, and before making the motion, OJ, Jessica, are you comfortable with the late addition of and the maximum outflow? Or is that motion going to, I don't know, is it going to delete that? Is it going to delete the currently word?
No, go put currently in.
Okay, well, I think what we need to do is get the motion read before we vote on it, is all I'm saying. Whoever wants to make this motion.
Oliver's going to make it, right?
I'm gonna make the motion, but with the word current, that's all we had to, with the correction with the current word in it?
Here's what we had in your packets, and he wants to add currently, right? Let's see if I
Yes.
can help you here. Well, he wants to add this right here at the, in between, there you go. That's perfect.
That's the neatest I write, I'm sorry.
No, I just want to make sure all I'm doing is where the National Weather Service current 10 inches over the 24-hour half period.
Right. This is all going to be new from here, from what's in your packet, to here. And then it's going to pick up with as determined again.
Okay.
Right.
So all we doing is adding. The motion is current rain, and we add current 10 inches over a 24-hour period and a maximum outflow of 10-year, 24-hour storm drain. Correct?
Well, it would also be increasing the retention capacity 25 years at the
Yeah,
beginning
you
of
just
that.
didn't read that, but that's in our packets. We
Yeah,
got
but we read that part.
Okay.
The only part I was reading was that
Okay,
extra
I'm just making
part
sure.
that we debated on.
Yep.
Okay?
Jessica, you comfortable with that?
To get the paper
Okay.
back.
So I move that motion
Second.
forward.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'll state it this way because the chair probably can't. Otherwise, the paper handed to Ms. Marcotte is the motion coming out of this committee, and this is a recommendation to the full council. I'll add that to your motion as a friendly, even though there's no such thing as friendly amendments. But I think everybody in this committee realizes that's all we hear is a recommending body. So moved and seconded by Mr. Lawler and Mr. Dawson respectively. Any further discussion of item number 7?
Mr. Joseph and Mr. Dawson.
Sorry, Mr. Joseph and Mr., what did I say? Mr. Lawler, because he sponsored it. He used to be part of the committee, I'm still used to that. Any discussion? Tavis, you have anything you want to, any objection? Hearing none, that motion carries, and Jessica will ask you to schedule that on Mr. Dawson's future council agenda.
Put it on the 15th.
I guess that's the 15th?
Yeah, put it on the November 15th.
Right. All right, item number 8 then. Give me just a second so I can bring it up and read it out of Novus. My computer's acting funny here.
Should've got an apple.
Yeah, I should have got the apple. It froze. Council Joseph's going to help me here. Item number 8 is listed as discussion, which we've changed by vote earlier to actionable. The requiring detention ponds to either be rip-wrapped or have a 5-to-1 slope or have a bulkhead to prevent erosion. Again, the sponsor tonight is Councilman Lawler, so we'll let him introduce the topic again, and we'll use the same protocol. We'll go to public speakers immediately thereafter.
Thank you, Chairman Satterley. This arises out of numerous complaints that we've had. I think many of us have had these complaints, and it also arises out of my backyard, losing about 6 feet of the pond, into the pond. So this
Didn't know
affects
it
me.
personally affected you, Aaron.
Personally affects me. I see it every day. The issue basically is when these ponds are built in neighborhoods. I'm not sure that the standard that we are requiring them to be built at is a standard that's enough to protect the citizens that eventually move in and purchase a house. Because I must say that for most of us, the most expensive and meaningful investment, other than our educations, probably of our children, is buying a house. And we have a situation that's going on all around the parish right now where retention ponds, within a year or two of the house being built, are eating away and moving closer to the house. And I know I've looked in my neighborhood, we have some people that had maybe 20 feet in some areas of yard, and it's reduced down to 10 feet. And it could become a very serious problem. So what I'd like to see done on this issue, and I'll be honest, I don't know the perfect solution to this, and that's why I listed multiple solutions. I've talked to multiple engineers that have said the bulkhead is the only way to go. And I've talked to some people that said riprap is just fine. I've talked to others that a slope with compaction and using sod instead of spray seed is the way to go. What I'm saying is I don't have a solution to this, but what I would enjoy seeing a recommendation for is that, number one, we set up a commission that could explore solutions for erosion, but also, as Councilman Dawson brought up, there's a serious issue with the long-term maintenance of these ponds. I know in my neighborhood we've got, I want to say, 4 or 5 ponds, and we've had one that is almost ruptured due to nutria. And this would have spilled the entire pond onto a neighbor's property that does not live in the neighborhood. There are liability issues there. There are safety issues there. If you're walking around one of these ponds and you twist and break an ankle, it creates a serious problem. So there has to be some sort of maintenance capability. And I can tell you that for the vast majority of neighborhoods, the cost of maintaining a pond is tremendous, especially for a single incident to come up at one time. You could talk about tens of thousands of dollars. I spoke with somebody, I believe it was regarding the Mars Point subdivision, and the estimate that they got to dredge out their pond was $100,000. Now, if you can imagine a subdivision, even if you've got 100 houses in it, that's still $1,000 a person. That's a tremendous amount of money. So what I would like to explore, have this commission explore, long-term maintenance costs of the ponds and how we can finance that. And I think there are multiple things that we can look at. Impact fees have been suggested. Also, what we're looking at right now for roads is something that could be suggested, is a very minimal assessment that over 30 years, if you were to put in a bulkhead, it may not have to be replaced for 30 years. So if you have a minimal amount just for maintenance of those ponds, that's something that could really benefit the people that own those houses. Because what's happening right now is we get calls saying, hey, come take care of our pond. And we all know from being on the council, we don't have either the funds or the ability to go in and maintain these ponds. Now, this is something that I was talking to a gentleman about the other day, and he asked me, well, what is the parish's interest in this? We don't have an interest in this as a parish, but as far as the citizens go, us as councilmen, that's where our interest is what is the interest that's going to help the citizens in the parish. But as far as parish government, we don't have an interest in making sure the ponds are rip-wrapped or not, because we don't maintain them. But we do have an interest in making sure that the citizens of this parish that either have lived here for years or are moving in, or that whose children are graduating from high school and are looking for a place to live because they're no longer living with their parents and they find a nice little starter home on a pond, we've got a duty to take care of them. And that's what I'd like to see, is a commission that can look into how we can help people protect their investments long term.
Thank you, Councilman Lawler. Before we call the public speakers, I just want to reiterate that, I think I said it on the last item, important to say it again. Spoke with O'Neill Parenting about this one, and he said pretty much it's whatever the council wants to do. He was, he said from a legal standpoint, okay with it. He does recognize the fact that, using his words, that if when you have the problem like the one I described in Mossy Oaks and that Mr. Lawler referred to as well, the only recourse that third party has is a judicial recourse, going to the courts. So we could say we want to keep our noses out of it, or we can say maybe let's help prevent that kind of stuff as well. I know one thing: if it was my backyard and it was sloughing off into the pond, and my fence was being jeopardized as well, or whatever, toward the back end of my property, I'd be very, very upset about it. And again, I believe we do have that responsibility Mr. Lawler talked about, because we should be discouraging and not encouraging people to have to sue in order to get fairness and so forth. So when we approve these subdivisions, from Matt's standpoint too, and I have some experience in this of cost, I personally support the bulkhead option as is top of the list. It is a little more pricey, a great bit more than slope. Let me also say Mr. Parrington was concerned a little bit about using that as an option, because he felt like it would reduce the slope so radically that children in play and so forth would be more prone to go down to the water's edge and potential for drowning and so forth and so on. So, but back to the bulkhead, I own property in St. Tammany with over 150 linear feet of bulkhead, and I can tell you that you can get bulkheading done for around $100 or so a linear foot. And that's deluxe stuff. I mean, I'm trying to keep Lake Pontchartrain out of my property, and that's 14-foot vinyl sheet piling with the interlocking situation in it. And that's the high pressure grade pilings driven every 6 feet to rejection, 20 foot, which a piling, by the way, I can give you the number. It's generally installed is about $10 a foot. So a $20 piling is $200. A $30 piling is $300, and a 40-foot piling is $400, and there's no need for that. I'm sure a 20 feet. When you know, up here, even though we're a coastal parish, would be more than adequate. And I don't know what the numbers are. I'm not an engineer again. I'm not trying to even giving you this information on how long something would last. But you know, I tell you what, if what's in my property right now doesn't last at least 30 years, I would be greatly, greatly disappointed and shocked and surprised. I won't be alive to see that. But so I've said enough. With that, we'll open the public comment period. Ms. Guppold, correct me if I'm wrong, by virtue of your card and your remarks, you felt like what you said is for both the last item and this one, so you don't want to speak again. Mr. Pettit.
The only issue with what I have, the way it's written on the agenda, requiring detention ponds to be either be riprap or have a 5-to-1 slope or have a bulkhead. I disagree with that. I think a 5-to-1 slope with riprap or a bulkhead. Okay, you don't. And soil compaction needs to be a part of whatever is put down here, or whatever is considered and moved out of this committee. And that's the only change that I would ask y'all to consider. We don't need riprap on our current slopes without soil compaction. We don't need riprap without a change in our slopes. It's too steep. It's too steep. So I would ask you to consider a 5-to-1 slope compacted to whatever the engineers recommend, because I'm not an engineer. A 5-to-1 slope with riprap or bulkheads, with bulkheads being preferred, the preferred method. And I would ask you all to consider that. Going back to what Aaron said earlier, looking at this election, and I was glad this millage passed. I came out in support of it. It passed by a 2-to-1 margin. And to take it a little further, looking at it precinct by precinct and breaking it down by council district, it passed in every council district on the East Bank. There was tremendous support for it, which tells us all what? Drainage is uppermost on our minds. So please consider that. But compaction needs to be a part of this, and riprap does not need to be a standalone option at the current slope that we allow. Make it 5-to-1 with riprap or a bulkhead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pettit. With that, we'll close the public comment period and open it up to this committee's discussion. Mr. Dawson.
So, you know, I'm thinking about a recommendation here to move this to the administration and have them do some engineering work. I agree with Mr. Pettit here, and I'm not sure what, you know, the riprap or the 5-to-1 slope. I don't know, you know, I'm not sure enough to comment on that. And I think we should have our engineering department and perhaps the outside group look at this before we make a decision. And additionally, and I'm going to go back to the previous, which is that would like to recommend that the administration make a recommendation to us on inspection on taking these ponds into the parish system and impact fees associated with that. And this should include inspection and maintenance of the ponds, and that they bring that back to this committee at the next meeting. I'd also like to get a recommendation from them on inspection of the existing ponds, so that to put that in the ordinance also, not just the new ones, but and then let's look and see if we can come up with a solution for that. You know, I know there may be some cost associated with that, but I can't imagine, you know, my subdivision or other subdivisions not be willing to give up the right of way if we take over the maintenance of those. We would have to know what the cost of that is. So maybe that's kind of a long.
I got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
So Mr. Dawson, would you like to make that in the form of a motion?
Yes, I would.
Okay, so it's been moved by Mr. Dawson that we refer this matter to our, I'm going to just say in-house engineering experts. That could mean, I guess, Mr. Sherrill with our engineering review agency that's paid on a case-to-case basis, I guess, or whatever expertise we have, to look at our choices. I'm going to just call it in erosion types of systems, be that riprap, as Mr. Pettit talked about, with a 5-to-1 slope, or bulkhead, et cetera. And then the addition that Mr. Dawson's talking about, and I concur, is to get some recommendations from the same experts, which this committee is not expert in, about taking these detention ponds into our maintenance system like we do with roads, and what would the costs be that would be associated with that. I would only add that besides the the frequency of doing it and so forth, you didn't say the cost part, is I'd like to know what kind of money is involved. If you're going to make the recommendation, for example, at bulkhead, what does that cost, and also that the developers and all will know what they're getting into and how much more that's going to change and how that might be structured. So, do I hear a second?
We have a question.
A question, yes, Mr. Turner.
I guess it's directed to Aaron. As far as these detention ponds, if we're going to try to get some type of maintenance done, and you said the impact fees, I know the impact fees on there go towards the newer subdivisions. What about the older subdivisions and maintaining their detention ponds? Will the parish start taking in detention ponds like they take in roads, or who's going to maintain those?
Well, this is off the top of my head, something I've thought a little bit about. I relate it kind of like you said to roads and subdivisions. I think this could be a system of, we currently have the authority to create special taxing districts. And if an individual subdivision decides that their pond, which has already been established, I don't know if it'd be a good idea for us to just go in there and accept that pond and have other subdivisions having to pay for all the newer ones. So I think we could give them the option that if they want to create some sort of special district that would help us pay for it, that'd be one way to do it. I mean, we have to look at different options, and I think that was the whole point of Councilman Dawson's sending this to the administration to look into it, because I don't know what the best idea is. I mean, it can't be done for free, and I don't believe that we have enough money floating around that we can start taking in ponds and maintaining those ponds without cutting into other services. So what we need to do, in my opinion, is let's see what the committee with I don't know who is Sean Sherrill would have to say about it.
Yeah.
Exactly, because I mean, I really, this is something that I admittedly I don't have a perfect solution for right now, so that I need to learn more about. I think we all do.
But at the current rate now, when ponds are built in the subdivision, nobody maintains them for the most part.
No, it's up to the homeowner association, depending on the ability of the homeowners association to do that. So no, many of them are not maintained, and that's one of the problems that's arising, is that we require these ponds to be built, and people buy houses, and unfortunately, a lot of them don't ask the question of who maintains this. They just buy a beautiful house on a pond, and all of a sudden something starts happening, and they call our drainage department, come out here and fix this, and they can't.
And what are our regulations as homeowners associations? Are we requiring them for these new subdivisions, or are they just optional?
No, that's optional.
So basically, as of right now, I'm just playing devil's advocate. We're allowing neighborhoods and requiring them to build detention ponds, but nobody's responsible for them.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not devil's advocate. I mean, it's just stating the truth. Yeah, we see a problem, so let's try and find a solution to it.
So by ordinance, are there a way for us to require our new subdivision would say over 10 houses that they're required to have a homeowner association that's required to maintain and provide insurance for these ponds?
No, I don't think legally there is. I think there's
You know what I'm saying? Do you think there's
constitutional issues there.
and what would be that constitutional issue, you think?
Freedom of association. We can't force people in a private group to create an association, but I think what we can do is we can create special districts.
You don't think we could do it under public welfare and safety, and they're required to?
No, but I think we could create something like a lighting district. We could have a pond district, in all seriousness.
Mhm. So would that be for each individual subdivision or for an area?
I think it'd probably be best for an individual subdivision.
So we have like 100 individual pond
Correct.
districts?
Correct.
And how will we determine the fee for?
Well, I think that's where engineering
Pine
department would come
Pine
in.
District.
Sorry, I'll let you finish. That's when the engineering department would come in. And, you know, I think what they would have to look at is how are we first building these ponds? You know, the fee to maintain a rip-wrapped pond is going to be different than the fee to maintain a bulkhead. So what would have to happen is, I think they could look at it, they could calculate a fee based on linear foot of maintenance over a 20 or 30-year period, and then calculate a fee that the home buyers or the developer would have to pay to maintain that pond over a 20 or 30-year period, and it would just be based on the type of pond that's built.
I know you said you didn't have everything hashed out yet, but this is just me thinking off top right now. So, you know, do you think it would be a possibility to require the developers to put up, if you're saying 20 or 30 years, that they're required to put up the projected cost for a 20 or 30-year period for these ponds, and then instituting the pond district that the subdivision is required to take over at that point?
I think that's a distinct possibility.
That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Turner. As a chair, let me throw a little more kerosene on that lawyer-to-lawyer exchange that we just had. and I'll say that with due affection and respect to both of you guys. One of the things, affection, thank you, Bill. One of the things that I hear a lot about on this too, let's not forget that the developer, when he, you know, subdivides this property, those lots that are right up next to the detention pond sell for more money. And the reason for that is that people are putting their paddle boats in there, their kayaks. I know I'm a former kayaker myself. That the whole idea of that is exciting, especially because now, I don't know if they stock the ponds or not, but they bass fish, they tell me them and so forth. So, you know, I don't have a personal problem telling those homeowners that are coming in there, you're going to be paying a little bit more to take care of this, because now you not only have the advantage of having this pond help you during the drainage times and so forth, but you've got a recreational source right there. In fact, that's recognized, obviously, if you're paying more for the property. So that's just something I thought I'd add. I think, Bill, you have something else?
I'd just like to make a couple of more comments. One, you know, I think that even if we can't take in the maintenance of these existing ponds, I'd like to at least have inspection. So, you know, maybe have that separated out, ask the administration to separate that out. What would it cost to come in and take over the maintenance, but also what would it cost to just do the inspection? Excuse me. Now, I just wanted to make one other point, which is that, and I understand the aesthetic value that you know, people have and the problems that they have with the erosion of that and affecting the aesthetic value. But my major concern is that, you know, if you have erosion there and you have erosion down below that outlet pipe, then these things are not detaining water anymore. So they're functionally not correct. And you know, that's what I'd like to see the main focus of this, which is, you know, are they functioning as designed?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so this has engendered, let me see if I can be able to read my writing here, another thought, Councilman Dawson's comment anyway. You know, pardon me, let me get my cheaters on. Anyway, I can't read my own handwriting. So, Bill, if I understand you correctly, what I wrote down while you were talking, can we actually inspect ponds on private property? Or that right there would say we'd have to take them in order for us to have
Well,
our...
we'd have to, at minimum, get them right away.
Right.
Yeah.
So that would require, one way or another, a radical change, not radical, but a change in the law, because we have no laws on that right now. Because right now, if I understand it correctly, once the pond's built, it's theirs.
Yes. The parish's hands
Right,
off on
so
it.
that's private property, you know, much in the same way as I can't go in your backyard and take pictures that if your grass has grown too high, whatever, I just can't do that. I mean, I can stay on the public road up front, I've been told, and photograph to my heart's content. But, Mr. Turner wants another turn.
I hate to be long-winded, so I tried, you know, but take issue with it. If we do accept the ponds into the parish system at some point, or create a pond taxing district, don't we run into the issue of having liability for those ponds?
Quite possibly.
Because I'm just saying, you know, Lake Pine drowns.
Sure.
And they came to me, and I'm not on the council anymore. I would sue the parish and sue them for a lot of money. So I guess my question is, are we just
Not just our engineers.
opening ourselves up for more liability? Because it's similar to the reason why we don't do the speed bumps anymore. So wouldn't this pond just be a wet speed bump?
I've never thought of a pond as a wet speed bump, but, no, I mean, that's also something we have to take into consideration, that there are, liability issues here with this. But, I mean, there are also ways that it can be kept in the purview of the homeowner association. But it could be funded by them. We could require them to maintain it in different ways. I mean, that's what we have to look at.
But at that point, I'm just going to sue the homeowners and the parish then.
That's fine. I mean, you can sue anybody. I mean, you're going to win.
Well, we would probably win, but I'm saying, 'cause I would sue.
No, you wouldn't win.
At that point, we would sue the homeowners for failure to keep the pond up, and the parish for failure to monitor the homeowner association to keep the pond up. So I think, it's a good idea to find some type of way for us to monitor these ponds or make sure the ponds are maintained. But I don't think we want to get the parish in too much of a liability situation with said ponds. You just don't know unless we're going to be there step by step monitoring how well they do these ponds. But then also that, in my opinion, that kind of, if we are too hands-on with the building of the pond, it creates a liability issue too, because at that point, if it's not built correctly and something occurs, then we're going to look at the parish saying, well, you were monitoring the pond, you were supervising this pond being built. Why didn't you catch this defect or that defect?
Well, it's funny, that brings up a related point, like with roads, when we inspect roads here in the
State
parish.
always gets sued for bad roads.
Well, my thought is, but it's also, we also, as government also inspects plants, different private properties. You inspect a restaurant, the government can go in and inspect a restaurant, but doesn't have to take ownership of that restaurant. So there are ways to do that, and, I think we need to explore those ways. But, like with a plant, the government can go in and inspect and ensure it's safe. And when we build a road, we go and inspect, and we're supposed to make sure that there's at least 2 3/4 inches of asphalt, I believe, on top of the base. If we're not doing that right, if we're not documenting that right, that's also a problem with the government, that we need to look at ourselves right now, maybe make those changes within government and how we do inspections, and make sure that the people that we have in charge of that are doing their job properly and that they've been trained properly. And this is something that, I think goes beyond simply, is it government's liability? We've got to be doing our job right. And I think we can write the law the right way that states that we have to go do those inspections. And that basically falls on the administration at some point to ensure that their employees are doing what they're supposed to do. And when we tell somebody, hey, we're going to go inspect your road, that we're able to inspect that road and make sure it's 2 3/4 of asphalt, and we don't have a problem with that. And if it's not that we have documented it correctly, we've got the proper documentation, that when the time comes, if we have to go to court, we've got everything we need to have. We do the exact same thing with ponds, that we have a standard protocol, and people do this all the time, that there's a standard protocol on how you're going to go inspect something. And that'll fall on the administration.
So Mr. Turner, I hear you loud and clear, and I have appreciation for your comments. So would you be willing to take Councilman Dawson's motion and add beyond just the recommendations on the type of erosion system and so forth, bulkhead or riprap or whatever, that the engineers would advise us on, and obviously they wouldn't have expertise on legal, that we would charge the administration as well to bring legal counsel in? I mean, I've got a broad stroke.
Yeah, for
O'Neill
liability
Parrington
issues.
saying that, hey, I'm down with this, but now you've opened up some can of worms that need to be discussed. So would you want to offer that as an amendment to Mr. Dawson's motion?
That's fine for liability issues, yes.
Yep. All right. So still don't have a second. So the motion now, as it stands, is not just to approach administration on the type of erosion control, and also to look into taking the ponds into the maintenance system. But as a result of that, what are the legal implications and so forth? So we would ask the administration to get with O'Neill Parrington, and I'm sure he'll look at other parishes that, in fact, we did have some discussion, come to think about, particularly in St. Tammany, where I believe they're doing some of this kind of stuff. I'm reasonably certain it can be done. Attorneys can get real creative. So if that's good with you, I just need a second.
Second, but I got a question.
Okay, moving second, now we're into discussion.
Aaron, what about commercial business pond.
Well, I've thought about that, actually. I would believe that we could exclude any pond that is not a shared pond. If an individual has a couple acres, they want to build their own pond, I don't think there's any need for us to get involved in that, because generally those are not retention ponds that have high banks. A commercial pond that has to build theirs, generally that is contained on their property. But I would say any pond that is shared by more than one landowner, I think that's a concern for everybody. But if it's the pond is contained all within a single piece of property, that doesn't have to be affected by this.
Okay. My only other comment I have on this is you just, if I build a subdivision on the West Bank, you just, with this here right here, just put my constituent completely out the market for home. I mean, we're adding costs across the board. I understand all that. It's just that, hey, it's just the market on my side of the river is not there for these, and it just made it more difficult when you add this on to it. I understand the safety, I understand the rule, I just wanted to make that comment. Okay?
Councilman, I completely understand that, but in the long term, that cost is going to be there for the people that buy those houses. And they may not be expecting down the road to get hit with a huge problem. And I would argue that what happens when that constituent buys a house and all of a sudden that pond has eroded so far, and you see a lot of houses now are built very close to the ponds. Some people like that. They put a deck there and they think, oh, I've only got 10 feet of yard, but I can see over this. When that thing starts eroding and all of a sudden you've got a foundational issue, that scares me.
Look, like I say,
I know.
I understand, but I just know you just put me out the market. A little bit more higher in the market prices for a home.
Well,
That's all.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table and seconded by Councilman Dawson and Councilman Joseph respectively. Any more discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, that motion carries. And,
Thank you, gentlemen.
Jessica, thank you, Mr. Lawler. You are happy with, right, probably a starting point might be to just tell the administration to replay the tape. This is a complex, no, I mean that, but I'll do it. It's a complex issue and protects you, protects all of us and everything. There's a lot of meat here that we have to really get on to. Yeah, and since it is actionable and we had a motion, what we'll do now is bring this back. This is not going to change our meeting schedule yet for this year, but we'll bring this back at the beginning of 2019. Item number 9, the last and final item, and thank everybody for staying with us late tonight, is an issue on Unified Land Development Code, Section 17405, preliminary plat procedure, Part E in your packets. Under Subpart 5, if you take a look at that, I'll read the language and then read the suggested change, which is underlined in your packets in red as well. Currently, the language last modified December 17th of the year 2009. A lot has happened since then, which has brought this issue to the forefront. Is the Planning and Zoning Commission shall receive in hard copy and electronic format the preliminary plat, supplemental material, comments from the planning staff, the engineering review agency, and the Department of Public Works for review prior to its regular meetings. The Planning and Zoning Commission shall, at its regular meetings, then discuss the plat as to conformity with the subdivision regulations. The Planning and Zoning Commission shall express its approval or disapproval and reasons thereof, and it stops there. Again, I spoke to Mr. Parrington about this, and I can tell you this, he wholeheartedly, empowered me to say that, if he were here, agrees that, well, part of him says we don't really need a change if the commission was doing what they're supposed to do. The language is rather clear. You're supposed to approve or disapprove. He said one way of being sure they understand that is the will of this council that would put it in writing that means we don't want you to conditionally and or by contingency, upon contingency, making these approvals of preliminary plats. So I've taken the liberty just to author this, but I'm not wedded to the exact language, and I'm sure certainly, again, it's being a recommendation, Mr. Parrington may change it or whatever, but I would add the sentence right under 17405E5. Approval of a preliminary plat with contingencies and or conditions is not allowed. With that, we'll open the public comment period, and we have a lone speaker in that tonight, Ms. Catherine Guppold. No, that's okay, we're fine.
Thank you again. I support adding language in our Unified Land Development Code to not allow preliminary plat approvals with conditions or contingencies. Preliminary plat approvals require an up or down vote of the Planning Commission. The fact that additional conditions or contingencies are being considered and required to approve such proposed development says that these plans do not meet our current code. These plats should not be brought before the Commission for approval until all conditions are met. Contingencies provide a loophole for the developer to skirt around our laws. They trample on the rights of adjacent property owners, and they continue to overload existing infrastructure. Roads should be widened, weirs should be in proper position, and roundabouts should be constructed prior to the approval of new development. These should not be conditions that are to be met after the fact. Some would describe this as running by the seat of your pants. Lack of poor planning does bring about poor performance. This is what we have had in Ascension Parish for over 20 years. Our council members, for the most part, have turned a blind eye to the many egregious actions of the Planning Commission and allowed development that increased our infrastructure deficit. Developers have been given the upper hand and infrastructure has taken a back seat. Problems have worsened and most council members refuse to address them except for proposing new taxes. The Ascension Parish yearly budget was $25 million 20 years ago. Today, in 2018, it is over $150 million. As citizens look around the parish and see the lack of progress, we are asking this question: where did all that money go? I expect my council member will support this proposal. He's currently the chairman of the council and he sits on this committee. I'm looking at him now. He supports rules and he promoted these rules that would take away the rights of free speech for every citizen who would come to the podium to speak. He has forbidden me to speak his name in public or address any other member of the council using their name. He would gag me and disrespect every citizen who would take his or her civic duty seriously to address the council. Is it disrespectful to speak the truth? I believe truthful words, though they may seem hard, are better to be spoken than compromising speech. Some things are worth fighting for. Free speech is one of them. Public servants who would muzzle the people and use their rules to manipulate and take away the free speech of citizens are more tyrant than servant. Please send this on to the full council for their consideration. Thank you.
Didn't use your name, Bill.
She was totally off the top.
Thank you, Ms. Guppold.
Totally off.
We on item number 9 in your package, gentlemen, not on Novus, but I handed it out before the meeting, a list of different,
I did put number 9 down on my card.
you know, Jeff, I must have missed that, sir. I apologize if I did. Let's
Sorry,
see.
didn't mean to interrupt.
You certainly did, sir, and my apologies to you. Please continue.
Thank you. Contingencies. I just want to bring 3 up, specific instances of the Planning Commission allowing contingencies that went above and beyond their responsibilities and their authority. The first one would be Oak Grove Townhomes. Somehow a deal was cut for a developer to put up a sum of money, $100,000, to work on their drainage issue on detention ponds, where they're having issues right now. The last word that the chairman of the Planning Commission said to our planning director was, "This will be done under the supervision of the parish. It has to be approved by the drainage department." Well, the chairman of the drainage board refused to put it on the agenda and told the homeowners in that neighborhood he would not put it on the agenda to be discussed. Our chief engineer said they weren't going to get involved. That's one instance. How can the Planning Commission, an appointed body, tell citizens of this parish they're not going to get involved, or they're going to have the parish take take care of this and oversee it. And that's what happened. Go back and look at the record. The second one is Highway 930 and the Jamestown 1 and 2 subdivisions. The Planning Commission allowed a contingency for the developer to add a little asphalt to a state highway. And as far as I know, Highway 930 is still a state highway as we speak right here today. By what authority did this unelected planning commission direct a developer to patch a state highway? The third one was the Ross Berthelot subdivision on Germany Road. In the Move Ascension project, the nearest intersection is listed in the works for a roundabout. The Planning Commission gave them contingent approval on their preliminary plat. And the contingency was this: either the roundabout is built or a traffic light is put in. I had to point out to our planning director, Mr. Fournier, that the parish of Ascension operates and takes care of no traffic lights in this parish. He didn't even know that. But the Planning Commission gave contingent approval as a secondary option for the developer to put a traffic light at the intersection in question. These guys are out of control. Take the contingencies away from them.
Thank you, Mr. Pettit. The chair will make some comments first, and then we'll open this up for discussion amongst the committee members. Again, as I indicated before public comment, put in, not into your packet, but handed out before this meeting, a 3-page document, because the public can't see this at home. It contains information on a total of 8 different decisions made by our Planning and Zoning Commission on various subdivisions: Highland Trace, Lake at West Creek, Jamestown Crossing, Oak Grove Townhomes, Forest Wood, Oaks at Bluffs, Galvez Trails. Let's see what else we have: Rivington, Grand Oaks, and Ascension Commerce Center. All of which, if you look in there, it talks about, you know, sometimes I've included information about what the planning department said, but certainly each time there's the contingency in which the property was, the proposal was approved. I want the commission to notice that more times than not, in fact, I think for at least half of these particular cases, and there are many, many more, the approval was by a slim margin of 4-3. To me, that indicates it's given at least certain of our appointed commissioners on P&Z some angst. I won't go into big details on any one of these. Mr. Pettit has just done that on 3 of them within the 8 that I presented in your packets. But I will just say, pay particular attention to the March 14th, 2018 decision on the Oak Grove Townhomes. Look at the contingency. I was there that night, and I got to tell you, I was stunned when Mr. Julio Dumas asked the chairman, should I read this prepared contingency into the record? And that contingency, if you look in as verbatim put into your packets there, is 16 lines long. You want to know, is it necessary to even do that? And this is the one, of course, where we're putting up the $100,000, as Mr. Pettit talked about, to remove a weir, which, by the way, that weir exists on property geographically located from the proposed subdivision. And like you talked about, who's going to administer that? And is it even legal? I mean, the EA Drainage Board, it would seem like, we even had a question about that a minute ago from Mr. Joseph, do we even need to do some of these ULDC changes that we're contemplating in this committee in front of the Drainage Board or not? Certainly something like this, removal of a weir, should have went in front of them. And if it's true that our chairman or whatever, as Mr. Pettit said, denied it, that's just, it's mind-boggling to me. So I rise in support, and we'll start discussion there to get rid of the contingency / condition situation that we're using right now. Again, I want to reiterate for the 3rd time, 3 items in a row, spoke to Mr. Parrington about it. He has no problems with it, and he said to me, Doc, it's just the way things should be happening anyway. Also, for what it's worth, Department, I spoke to Mr. Ricky Compton, our Farm and Planning and Development Director. And he has been, both when he was in our employ and in talking to me since, a staunch advocate of, in other words, he would like to see it just be an up or down vote. I'll make one third and final comment. As a Planning and Zoning Commission, when I went through Capital Regional Planning Commission training, I can tell you my trainer was somewhat taken aback that we were allowing approvals even back then. I wouldn't participate in them. You can check that record out, contingent upon. The big issue that my instructor talked about is, well, how do you have any knowledge, if you do this, that contingency ever came to pass? And my answer is, well, for the large part, whether we writing this on a plat map or not, we really don't. I mean, the weird example that was just given by Mr. Pettit and that I expanded upon gives a 2-year time frame. You know, that may or may not happen, but if it doesn't, it's approved and that subdivision's there. Now what? So I'll stop there and we'll open the floor up to discussion. Mr. Dawson.
Well, do you know, Doc, what the state law is on this? Is the state law clear? I mean, because I know that, I'm in support of it. I'm just curious.
According to O'Neill, there'd be no legal problems if we added the sentence that and he's seen that. I've talked to him about it on the phone, or something like it. Like I say, I'm not wedded to it, but if he wanted to change it some. And that sentence is very, let's look at that again since you're asking the question. It would say, it's just clarifying where it says it, it shall means it has to express its approval or disapproval and reasons thereof. And then we would add, approval of a preliminary plat with contingencies and or conditions is not allowed. And therefore, our planning department would have to, with the developer, I think, be sure that this is what you really want us to consider, at least the people we've appointed tonight. Because let's face it, you could continue, in my mind, to go on and on and on. I've seen one that had like 12, 13 contingencies to eventually get it passed. Is that really something we want to do? That would indicate it wasn't in the right shape in my mind to start with if it would require that much. I mean, you either met the code or you don't. The road's wide enough, the drainage is adequate. Some of these, if you read it, you've done the study, and it's not depending on who's going to put a signal up or not, or a roundabout or whatever it is. But I think the answer to your question, Bill, and I apologize again, O'Neill's not here, I invited him. He said we'd be on legal good ground to do this.
Okay.
Mr. Joseph.
Lance Brock and,
Oh, excuse me, OJ, let me just say this too. Bill, as you know, and we all know, this is just a recommendation. So if it goes to the full council, and if I've misinterpreted anything he said, the full council will have a bite at the apple with Mr. Parrington certainly present there, because he attends all council meetings, and, or his equivalent, Cody, whatever, and say, no, you can't do this, or you can. He's indicated to me clear you can. Sorry, OJ.
okay. Lance Brock and Jerome, them review the plans and make sure they fall in the guidelines, correct?
That is correct. And the engineering review agency.
Right. I'd
Sean
like to
Giroux.
understand their position on this for me. I don't have a problem with it, but I'd just like to understand what their position is on this to feel comfortable with it.
Right.
Okay?
Let me just respond to that by saying I told right after we had the CPEX meeting and we were there together in a hallway conversations, if you wanted to be here, that's fine with me. Mr. Jerome, and obviously he's not here, so I guess you'd have to ask him his reasons why he chose not to be. As you know, sometimes that puts him in compromising positions with the administration. I'm not saying that's the reason or anything, but I did tell him right there on the spot, I said, my job is not to give you any grief at all. And he told me, Doc, I appreciate that. Again, if we pass this out of committee and it goes to the full council, just like Mr. O'Neill Parrington, legal counsel, I would guess that our planning director would be there as well and could answer, Mr. Joseph, any questions you might have. Travis? Nothing. The chair would entertain a motion
I move. Do we move that forward?
to the full council at the 15th date.
Well, let me ask this. Would, since we have some questions, do you want to move it forward to the consent or move it forward out? Or does it matter?
Well, to me, Bill, it doesn't matter because you, I think correctly, are doing the rules on that if anybody wants to object and move it out of consent, they can do so. Because that could be Mr. Joseph or anyone that wants further information. So,
So, yeah, I'll stand by the motion.
I mean, if it,
We'll
so,
just
right,
move it
so I
forward.
think it's kind of a moot point, but I don't, if you want to phrase the motion now that it's not going to be, we're not sending it forward on consent, even with a unanimous decision tonight, I'm
If I
fine
will
with that as
second
well.
it with that, so we can make sure those bodies,
Well, you can't second with that unless he wants to add that to his motion, or you can
Well,
amend his motion.
well, that's what I
I'll make
mean,
that,
Doc.
I'll take that friendly amendment.
Okay, so the
Right.
motion has been rephrased to include that we're going to send it forward to the full council, but not onto the consent agenda, but to be a separate actionable item.
Yeah.
And I have a second from Mr. Joseph. Is that correct, gentlemen?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, that motion carries. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
It's moved by Mr. Turner adjourn, and second by
Myself.
OJ. We are adjourned.